I'm Brendan Donnelly, the leader of the Rejoin EU party, and today I'd like to discuss the much touted supposed reset of relations between the EU and the UK, which Keir Starmer says he's bringing about. I will conclude that there's very little beyond rhetoric in this supposed reset, and suggest that even the idea of talking about a reset in the way that he is speaking is at best a delay and possibly a barrier to the real decision which the United Kingdom has to take, which is clearly to rejoin the European Union in order to reverse the political and economic damage of Brexit. Before they came to government, the Labour Party used to like to talk about the possibility, as they saw it, of renegotiating the trade and cooperation agreement that Boris Johnson signed in 2019. This was always a misunderstanding based on a misreading of the treaty, which said that there will be a review of the working of the treaty in 2025 and 2026. There was never any question of renegotiating the treaty, which on the whole is working quite well for our European partners. So the Labour Party has now stopped talking about this idea of renegotiating the treaty and talks about a reset. Now, this reset is a pretty meagre affair, and it has to be, because Keir Starmer and others have set out supposed red lines, which will constrain enormously the possibility of resetting our relations with the European Union. We're not going to join the customs union, we're not going to join the single market, we're not in any circumstances going to enjoy or put up with freedom of movement. So these are very, very substantial barriers to having a genuine reset in relations between the EU and the UK. We're told that next week, Sir Keir Starmer will be meeting Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission. That's all very well and good. But the terms in which this meeting were heralded by Starmer and his press team gave me some cause for foreboding. He said he was going to try and make Brexit work through these conversations in the interests of the British people. Well, I think everybody knows that Brexit can't be made to work. The best you can aspire to is somewhat to mitigate the damage which is done by our absence from the European Union. Also slightly off-putting was the thought that these negotiations would simply be going to be there in order to make Brexit work for the British people. That's to ignore the fact that the European Union has an interest in these negotiations. And it's only going to be if they see an interest in changing the relationship or reviewing aspects of the relationship that change will occur. So I think Keir Starmer will be much better advised to talk about making the relationship work better for both sides, rather than just talking about making it work for the United Kingdom. That smacks already of cakeism. The Labour government seems to have three areas in which it thinks it will be possible to contribute to this so-called reset: defence, internal security and trade. All of them are laudable goals, but there's problematic aspects to all of them. As far as defence is concerned, it may well be that there could be a closer defence relationship between the UK and the European Union. But Theresa May attempted at the beginning of the negotiations to play the defence card, claiming that somehow the United Kingdom would be less committed to the defence of Europe if it didn't get a satisfactory arrangement for Brexit. And that was pretty roundly rebuffed at the time. It's an incredible threat. The defence of the United Kingdom and Europe is so intertwined that the thought that somehow the United Kingdom could make this a negotiating chip is a pretty implausible one. There's also the point that the British government are clearly hoping to have access to the developing European defence procurement market. That's governed by internal market rules, and I think the scope for any joy for the Labour government under that heading is very limited. On internal security, the hope of the Labour government, and it's not an unreasonable one, is that it may be possible to come to an agreement with the European Union on burden sharing for irregular migration for asylum seekers. That may well happen, but it will be on the basis of burden sharing. It won't be a free ride for the United Kingdom. It will be something that is hammered out in difficult negotiations, which will be politically controversial in the United Kingdom. So watch this space, but no free ride, no cherry picking, I think, from the European side for the United Kingdom. The third aspect of this supposed reset that the Labour government like to talk about is trade. And there was an amusing event when Keir Starmer went to see Scholz, and the press release that was put out afterwards talked about the possibility of a trade pact between Germany and the United Kingdom. But it very much underlined that that has to be compatible with the treaty obligations of the German side within the European Union. Trade within the European Union is very much a community competence, something for which the Commission, as an independent agency, has particular responsibility. The thought that somehow that the United Kingdom will be able to use the back door of a bilateral arrangement with Germany to jack up its trade with the European Union, I'm afraid is a fantasy. So there is scope for improvement of relations. But there are pitfalls on the way. One of the particular pitfalls that we've been reminded of recently has been the question of the youth mobility scheme. Just before the general election, the European Commission put forward a proposal for an enhanced programme of visas for young people from continental Europe and United Kingdom reciprocally to be able to work and study in the United Kingdom and the European Union. That was roundly rejected by the Labour Party on the basis that it was a first step towards freedom of movement. Yvette Cooper recently has had the brass neck to claim that the European Union, the European Commission, confounded the two, mixed the two up in youth mobility being equated with freedom of movement. That's the opposite of the truth. It's the British government which has made the confusion. And it is playing, I'm afraid, into the hands of those who simply say, there are too many foreigners here, whether it's visas or freedom of movement, we're not interested. The European Union has come to see this question of the youth mobility scheme as being something of a touchstone, something of a precondition for any improvement in EU-UK relations. I hope very much that the United Kingdom government will come off its high horse as far as this is concerned and recognise that this is something which could be beneficial to both sides. We may ask ourselves, why is the Labour government taking so cautious or prudent a view of this supposed reset which it says it wants to bring about with the European Union? I think the answer to that is essentially electoral. And if you look back to the day before the general election, Keir Starmer told us that he couldn't envisage any circumstances in which we would rejoin the European Union in his lifetime. Now, that's on actuarial averages 20 years from now. And he said it appears, because he suddenly received a shocking piece of polling from his private pollsters, that Reform were doing a great deal better than had been predicted, and the Conservatives were much nearer to the score of the Labour Party than had been originally anticipated. That turned out to be the case. The pollsters greatly overestimated the gap between the Labour Party and the Conservatives. And I think that gave Keir Starmer a shock. And I think he'd worried that the Labour voters, who are flirting in some cases with the ideas of reform, who voted for him in 2024 to get the Conservatives out, maybe tempted to vote for reform in 2028 or 2029. So I think he has a very cautious view of what he's able to do or thinks he's able to do without risking his fragile electoral coalition, which is very strong in the House of Commons, but much less strong at the level of the popular electorate. In his recent party speech, Keir Starmer talked about the need to make difficult decisions and put the country before the party. Well, I'm afraid he's not doing that as far as Brexit's concerned. The claim that Brexit can be made to work, the claim that it can be made to work for the British people, is simply something said as a temporising stopgap in order to reassure the pro-Europeans in his party that he's doing something in a pro-European direction, but to reassure those who he regards as uncertain Labour supporters that he's not going to have any of this nonsense about free movement or rejoining the single market. There are those who hope that over time, economic pressure and political pressure will drive Starmer towards a more accommodating view of the single market and the customs union. I have my doubts about that. I'm not sure at all that the European Union will be prepared to allow that cherry picking. And even if they did, would take a long, long time for such negotiations to come to fruition, to be implemented, and to be tested. Anybody who says, let's rejoin the single market, let's rejoin the customs union as an alternative or possibly as a stepping stone towards rejoining the European Union is essentially saying we can't be within the European Union again for 15 or 20 years. And I wonder very much whether we're going to have a United Kingdom in 15 or 20 years unless we rejoin the European Union. I think people underestimate the convulsive and the seismic effect constitutionally and politically of Brexit on the United Kingdom. The chaos that we've had within the Conservative Party, and which may well be mirrored within the Labour Party over the next few years, is a phenomenon, a consequence of Brexit. Of course, the economic implications of Brexit are very important, but much more important are the political implications. The reason why you should rejoin the European Union is because it's a recognition of who we are as a country. We are a middle-sized European country with European interests and European values. We're much stronger and we're much more united when we're working together with our neighbours rather than when we're engaged in a constant competition of pretending that we're better than they are and they've got everything wrong. I'm afraid that the 20 or 30 years of denigration of the European Union, which began in the 1990s and which still continues at a lesser pace, is something which has left its mark on British public opinion. I'm afraid the mistake that Keir Starmer is making is that he thinks that this hostility, these caricatures of the European Union somehow can be accommodated and appeased. They never can be. They have to be taken on, they have to be destroyed, they have to be demolished. And I'm afraid I don't think that Keir Starmer is the person to do that. The Rejoin EU party has a clear message and a clear mission, which is always to be saying that the only answer to Brexit is to reverse it. We want to rejoin the European Union. We want to do so as quickly as possible. And we very much fear for our country if that is delayed too long. Thank you very much.
And support our cause on Patreon. Be part of the movement.
Vote Rejoin EU. Join the EU vision.